things. So first we're gonna do, we gotta get some nice, beautiful mood. First of all, it's raining outside. Just about that. Secondly, we also need some fire in the background. Because when it's story time, chat, the fireplace is lurked. The fireplace is lit. And we're ready for a story. What we're gonna do is we're gonna get that story we are deciding to have. Lagasp. Thank you for the lurk, Momo Ninja. Means a lot. Yeah, it's story time. You gotta stay here. Suddenly lurking wasn't the best thing to do anyway. So, we're changing you to up there. We're changing you here. So I got you guys on my right side now instead of my left. And we are going to get Askeladden again. You might stick around. Strange that. So last time we had Askeladden, who made the princess accuse him for lying. Other than that, we had Askeladden, who had an eating contest with a troll. And Askeladden, who stole the troll's silver ducks. I love how my girl is also, one of my girls is also sitting there ready. So we can either do Red Fox and Askeladden, or Askeladden and the Good Helpers. Now I love Askeladden and the Good Helpers, and it's quite a story. It takes, I don't know how much they've shortened it. My man Zero. Welcome to story time. You guys ready? Come sit by the fire. Once upon a time, there was a king, and this king had heard tell of a ship that sailed as swiftly on land as on water. So he also wanted such a one. And to the one who had built it, he promised the king's daughter and half the kingdom. And he pronounced this in his churches all over the country. There were many who tried, you know, for half the kingdom would be good to have. And the king's daughter could be good too. But things went badly for most. Well, there were 3 brothers away in a forest village. The eldest was called Per, the second was called Paul, and the youngest was called Espen Askeladd. Due to his habit of sitting and digging and raking in the ashes. Askeladd is ash lad, actually, on English. But on the Sunday, the king's pronouncement was read out in the church. And it was fortunate that he too was in church. When he came home and told about it, Per, who was the eldest, asked his mother for a parcel of food. For now he would go off on his way and try to build a ship. And win the king's daughter and half the kingdom. When he had his knapsack on his neck, he swept off on his way. He met an old man who was crooked and frail. "Where are you off to?" said the man. "Oh, I am off to the forest to make trow for my father. He does not like to eat together with the rest of us," said Per. "A trow it shall be," said the man. "What do you have in the sack?" asked the man. "Muck," said Per. "Muck it shall be then," said the man. So Per swept into the oak forest and chopped and logged as best as he could. For all his chopping and all his loggings, he got nothing but trow after trow. When dinner came around, he would have something to eat, and took up his knapsack. But it was not food that was in his knapsack, no. As he now had nothing to eat, and his carpentry went no better, he grew weary of his work, shouldered his axe and sack, and rushed home to his mother. Again. Then Paul would go on his way and try his luck, to build a ship and win the king's daughter and half the kingdom. He asked his mother for some food, and when he had it, he shouldered his sack and he set off across the mark. On his way, he met an old man who was crooked and in need of God's grace. "Where are you off to?" said the man. "Oh, I'm going to the forest to make some pig's trough for a little pig," said Paul. "A pig trough it shall be," said the man. "And what do you have in your sack?" "A muck," said Paul. "The muck it shall be then," said the man. So Paul swept up to the forest and began to chop and log with all his might. But however he chopped and however he joined, there was never anything other than throws, forms, and pig throws. He did not give in yet, though, but carried on till late in the afternoon before he thought about taking any food. Then he suddenly grew so hungry that he had to take out his sack of food immediately. But when he took it up, there was no crumb of food in the sack. It was only muck. Paul grew so wroth that he turned the sack inside out and beat it against a tree stump, took his axe, swept off to the forest and home, just like that. When Paul had come home, Askeladden wanted to go on his way and asked his mother for some food. "Perhaps I will be the fellow to build a ship and win the king's daughter and half the kingdom," he said. "Yes, I expect you will," said his mother. "You who does nothing but stir and rake in the ashes." "No, you may not have any food," said the woman. Askeladden did not give up for that. He asked for so long that eventually he was allowed. He did not get any food, but that did not matter, for he stole away a couple of oats, lefses, and a little flat bear, and he set off. When he had walked for a while, he met the same old fellow, crooked, pathetic, and frail. "So where are you off to then?" asked the man. "Oh, I'm going to the forest, and if that might help to build a ship that sails swiftly on land as on the water," said Askeladden. "For the king has pronounced that the one who can build such a ship shall have the king's daughter and half the kingdom," he said. "What do you have in your sack?" asked the man. "Oh, it's not much to speak of. It is supposed to be some food," Askeladden replied. "If you give me a little of your food, then I shall help you out," said the man. "You're welcome," said Askeladden, "but there's nothing more than 2 oat loaves and a little flat bear." But it did not matter what it was. If only he could have it, then he would surely help. When they came to the old oak forest, the man said this: "Now you should cut out a splinter, and then you should put it back in again as it stood before. And when you have done so, you can lie down and sleep." Well, Askeladden did as he said. He lay down to sleep, and in his sleep he thought he heard chopping and hammering and logging, and sawing carpentry, but he could not awaken before the man woke him. Then the ship stood fully clad with oak. "Now you should climb aboard, and everyone you meet you should take with you," said the fellow. So Espen Askeladd thanked him for the ship, sailed away, saying he would do so. When he had sailed a distance, he came to a tall, thin wretch who lay close by the mountain, eating granite. "Who are you for a fellow, lying here eating granite?" said Askeladden. Well, he was so hungry for meat that he could never be sated, and therefore did he have not eat granite, he said. And then he asked if he might be allowed to sail with the ship. "If you want to come, then climb aboard," said Askeladden. He wanted to, yes, and so he took with him some big granite rocks for food. When they sailed a distant moor, they met one who lay on a sunny bank, sucking at a barrel tap. "Well, who are you for a fellow?" said Espen Askeladd. "And what good does it do, lying sucking at barrel's tap?" "Oh, when one has no barrel, then one must be satisfied with the tap," said the man. "I'm so thirsty for beer that I can never slake my thirst for beer and wine," he said. Then he asked if he might be allowed to sail with the ship. "If you want to come, then climb aboard," said Askeladden. He wanted to, yes, and so he climbed aboard and brought the tap along for the sake of his thirst. When they had sailed a distant moor, they met someone who lay with one ear to the ground, listening. Who are you for a fellow? And what shall lying and listening to the ground be good for? As said Aspen Askeladd, I'm listening to the grass, for I have such a hearing that I hear it growing, he said. And then he asked if he might be allowed to sail with the ship. There was no refusal to that. If you want to come, then climb aboard, said Askeladd. When they had sailed the distant moor, they came to the one who aimed and aimed. Who are you for a fellow? And what good does standing aiming do? Asked Askeladd. I see so sharply, he said, that I can easily shoot to the end of the world. And then he asked if he might be allowed to sail with the ship. The ship is getting big, chat. If you want to come, then climb aboard, said Askeladd. Yes, that he would, and so he climbed up. And when they sailed a distance more, they came to the one who jumped on one foot, and the other had 7 ships' ballast weights fastened to it. Who are you for a fellow? Said Askeladd. And what good does a jumping around on one leg with 7 ships' ballast weights on the other do? I fly so easily, he said. If I walked on both feet, I would come to the ends of the earth in 5 minutes. And then he asked if he might be allowed to sail on the ship. If you want to come, then climb aboard, said Askeladd. Yes, this he would, and so he climbed aboard with Askeladd and his companions. When they had sailed a distant moor, he's meeting a lot of friends, chat. They met one who stood holding his mouth. What manner of fellow are you? Said Askeladd. And what good does standing there holding your mouth do? Oh, I have 7 summers and 15 winters in my body, he said. So I must hold my mouth, for were they all to slip out, then they would straightway destroy all the world, he said. And then he asked if he might be allowed to sail with the ship. If you want to climb aboard, said Askeladd. Yes, he would go with him. And so he climbed aboard with the others. And when they had sailed a good distance, they arrived at the king's farm. Askeladd swept straight to the king and said that now the ship stood ready in the yard, and now he would have the king's daughter as the king had promised. The king was none too pleased at this, for Askeladd did not look too special, but was both black and sooty, and the king would fain give his daughters to such a wretch. So he said that he would have to wait a little. He could not have the king's daughter before he had emptied the king's meat store of 300 barrels of meat. It is the same if you can do it before tomorrow. Then you shall have her, said the king. I will try, said Askeladd. And I suppose I'm allowed to take one of my friends with me? Yes, this he was allowed. Even if he wanted to take all 6, said the king, for he believed it was impossible, even if he had 600. Askeladd took only one, the one who ate granite, and was always so hungry for meat. And when they came and opened the store, he had eaten everything, so there was nothing left but 6 small cured shoulders, one each for the other friends. So Askeladd swept into the king and said that now that the meat store was empty, he would have the king's daughter. The king went out to the store, and it was empty, sure enough. But Askeladd was both black and sooty, and the king thought it far too bad that such a wretch should have his daughter. So he said that he had a cellar full of beer and old wine, 300 barrels of each kind, which he would have drunk up first. And it is the same if you are fellow enough to drink it up at this time tomorrow. Then you shall have her, said the king again. I shall try, said Askeladd. But may I take one of my friends, he said. By all means, said the king. He thought he had so much beer and wine that he would find it impossible, all 7. Askeladd took with him he who sucked at the tap and was always thirsty for beer, and the king locked them in the cellar. There he drank barrel after barrel, as long as there was some left, but in the last he left some, so that there was a couple of pots for each of the friends. In the morning they opened up the cellar, And straight away Askeladden swept into the king and said that he was finished with the beer and wine, and now he would have the king's daughter as he had promised. Well, first I must go down into the cellar and see, said the king, for he did not believe it. But when they came into the cellar, there was nothing but empty barrels. But Askeladden was both black and sooty, and the king thought it would be unseemly to have such a son-in-law. So he said it was the same to him. He would get water from the ends of the earth in 10 minutes for the princess's tea. Then he would have both her and half the kingdom. For that was simply impossible, he thought. I shall try, said Askeladden. So he went to he who hopped on one foot and had 7 ships' ballast weight on the other, and said that he could untie the weights and use his leg as quickly as he could, for he should have water from the ends of the earth for the king's daughter's tea in 10 minutes. He took off the weights, took a pail, and gone was he straight away. But time passed, 7 long and 7 broad. He did not return. Finally, there were no more than 3 minutes until this time was up, and the king was content as if he had won a mark. But then Askeladden called for he who would hear the grass grow, and said that he should listen for what had become of him. He has fallen asleep at the well, he said. I can hear him snoring, and the trolls are nitpicking him, he said. And then Askeladden called for the one who could shoot straight to the ends of the earth, and asked him to put a bullet in the troll. Yeah, he did so. He shot it right in its eye. The troll let out a roar, so he awoke. He would go and fetch the tea water, and he came back to the king's farm, and there was still a minute left of the 10. Askeladden swept into the king and said that there was the water, and now he should have the king's daughter. He should think there was now nothing more to talk about. But the king thought of him black and sooty, now as before, and did not like to have him as a son-in-law. So the king said that he had 300 embraces of wood that he would dry grain with in the sauna. And if it's the same for you, if you are a fellow to sit there and burn it all up, then you shall have her. There is no doubt about it, he said. I must try, said Askeladden, but I suppose I'm allowed to take one of my friends. Yes, or all 6, said the king, for he thought it would be warm enough for them all. Askeladden took with him he who had 15 winters and 7 summers in his body, and swept down to the sauna in the evening. But the king had built up the fire so that it was such a bonfire that they might have cast coke ovens. Oh, cool. They could not come out again, for they had hardly gone in before the king threw the bolt across and hung a couple of padlocks beside. Then said Askeladden, you should let out 6-7 winters, so it's about summer warm. Then it grew so that they could bear it there. But it was night drew on, and it was a little too chilly. Then Askeladden said that he should temper it with a couple of summers. And then they slept until long into the day. But when they heard the king moving outside, Askeladden said, now you should let out a couple of more winters, but make the last one go straight in his face. Yes, he did so. And when the king opened the door to the sauna, thinking they lay burnt up, they sat there shivering from the cold, so that the teeth chattered. And he, with the 15 winters in his body, let out last one right in the king's face, so he got a big frost blister. Shall I get the king's daughter now? Said Askeladden. Yes, take her, have her, and take the kingdom as well, said the king, because he dared say no any longer. So they held the wedding, and trumpeted, and made a spectacle, sent up fireworks. While they were grasping after chargers, they took me for one and gave me porridge in a bottle and a milk in a basket. And then they shot me all the way here, so that I might tell you how things went. Og snipp, snapp, snute, så eventyret ute. Or as you say it in English, the end. There we have it. It was a little long one, but it's one of the longest on Askeladden, but it's a really good one. They've done a good job, I think. So that was story time. Hope you guys enjoyed it.